Hello class, this is Megan Cardwell, Intro to Conservative Biology with Miss Margaret Foes, Spring Semester 2019. My project is over gray bats. Let's get started. Abstract. Gray bats is an endangered species according to the ICUN Red List. Gray bats play a role in our ecosystem. They play an important role in the checks and balances of our nature because they are a controller of night-flying insects like mosquitoes. These bats live in cave and cave-like places. There is a couple reasons why gray bats are endangered, with one of them being the white nose disease and another being because of habitat loss. A management plan for the gray bats would be to learn the habitats and the destructions that humans do to it without realizing and bring awareness to it. We have to conserve the habitats of the bats. Gray bats. The gray bat is a medium-sized bat, approximately 3.5 inches long, with a wingspan of 11 to 13 inches. It weighs about half an ounce. This bat can be found in the same areas as other mitosis, but that distinguished by uniformly colored hair shaft that range in color from gray to reddish brown. Gray bats, the technical term is Mitosis grinsens. There's one hanging up over here, and that's a picture. Habitats. Bats can only live in caves and cave-like places. The climate is a big factor for the bats inside the caves. Gray bats hibernate like all other bats. It has to be 42 to 52 degrees in a cave for gray bats to hibernate. These bats hibernate in caves year-round. There isn't many caves around the U.S., so these bats all have to go in the ones that they can. These bats can be found in Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. Over here is another picture of the bats hanging from the cave, hibernating. Life history. These bats migrate between summer and winter caves. Mating occurs when the bats return to the winter caves, which is normally in September and October. The females begin to emerge in late March. Female bats store sperm over the winter and become pregnant in the following spring. So they store it for a whole year, practically. Right there's another bat over here. And you can see the eyes. Threats to gray bats. The biggest threat to gray bats is human disturbance because bats are in the caves year-round. Caves like Mammoth Cave and Lost River Cave here in Bowling Green, Kentucky are examples of how humans can disturb them. Those are national parks, so they have lots of visitors going in and out of the caves while the bats are hibernating. If you arouse a bat while it's hibernating, you will cause the bat to use up a lot of its energy, which will lower the energy reserves. Over here's more bats hibernating. These photo credits are to Jeff Laporte. Threats to gray bats. White nose syndrome is the growth of white fungal that develops on the bat snouts. This is something that can be spread to the uncontaminated bats. The bats all hibernate together in the colonies, so therefore the other bats would end up with the white nose syndrome if we didn't, get the bats that is contaminated out of there. And over here and in the picture you can kind of see the white fungus growing on the bat, but this is a close-up picture I could find. That is the example of a bat that does have the white nose disease. Threats to gray bats. Another way humans are a threat to bats would be by the fact that we use pesticides. We use pesticides to keep bugs away from us. But what we don't think about is what species eats those bugs. Gray bats is one of the species that eats the bugs. When humans are using pesticides, not only is it taking away most of the bats' diets, but the bats may happen to come in contact with the pesticides, which also could cause a bat to die. So we really got to think about what pesticides we're using and how close we're using them to the bats' habitats, because we don't want to cause more damage. And over here, it says pesticides don't know when it stopped. Pesticides don't know when to stop killing. Go organic. I thought that was funny, and it went along with it. All right, habitat degradation. Flooding is a habitat degradation for gray bats. There's a lot of low spots inside most caves, so when water rises in it, the lower spots of the cage. So when the water rises it in the lower spots of the cage, it completely submerges those spots first. Gray bats live inside caves, so if a cave becomes flooded, it ruins the habitats of those bats. So that therefore they gotta hibernate. They have to go elsewhere to hibernate. And here's a picture of a cave that's flooded. This picture is actually from 2009. Photo credits to Josh. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife efforts. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife created a recovery plan for the gray bats. The recovery plan consisted of preserving the caves for the bats and preserving the bats. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife added them to the U.S. list of endangered and threatened wildlife and plants on October 28, 1976. Over here, you can see a bat. The conservancy groups made attempts to track the bats to understand what could be causing them to be endangered. This group started trying to track the bats so they could set up harp traps in front of the This group started trying to track the bats, so they set up harp traps in front of the caves to catch the bats. They then give the bats a haircut and apply surgical glue to a transmitter, and they apply it to the bat. This was their way of tracking the bats to see if the wind development was affecting the gray bats. These bats are moving all night, so this was their attempt to try to figure out how to conserve the gray bats. They thought maybe the wind development had something to do with it. So over here you can see them where they gave this bat a haircut and they're applying a transmitter, and over here there's a gentleman with a bat in his hand and he's doing the same. It's just a different angle. Merlin Tuttle took interest in gray bats in 1959 when he was a teenage boy living in Tennessee. Merlin noticed the bats sweeping into the cave and a few days later being gone. He started going into caves and tagging the bats. By October 1960, he had tagged hundreds of bats. He was able to gather that bats migrated during that time. Merlin followed bats, and once they started becoming endangered, he started going into caves, monitoring the climate of the caves. In 1973, Merlin found that humans had intentionally been setting caves on fire and throwing fireworks in there to kill the bats. Merlin tried to bring awareness to what was going on, so that was his way of conserving the gray bats. Okay, so propose a management plan. My plan for conserving gray bats is limiting the human disturbances in the caves. There should be more enforcement of humans not disturbing the bats. Within so many feet of the cave, there should be no pesticides used to try to bring insects to those areas for the gray bats to have enough food for their diets. A plan would be to reserve one cave for every state that is restricted from human disturbances. This cave wouldn't be like in a national park. They wouldn't have human interaction coming in to look around, to explore the cave. The only people that would be coming in would be the conservationalist that isn't gonna harm the bats, but only be in there for a limited amount of time so they can track the bats and do what they need to do to monitor which bats all are coming in and out of the cave. That way the bats could have a safe place to go without human disturbances. My thoughts is if we could have one cave per state, that we could build the population of the bats by having safe caves. If it was to work as planned, it could really help with stopping bats from becoming extinct. And over here you see more bats hibernated up on a cave. And the photo credits to this go to U.S. Fish and Wildlife as well. Measuring success. My goal is to bring gray bats out of endangerment species. Gray bats need secure habitats, so having a cave that is not open to the public and specifically for gray bats and other bats will help. I will collect the data by going into the caves and tagging the bats every 3 months to see how many bats are in there. This will monitor the bats' movements throughout the caves. After combining the amounts of all bats tagged over the time period, as well as how many bats aren't tagged to show the growth in the gray bats. So I'm practically hoping to go in there and be able to monitor how many bats are coming in and out and being able to see the growth that's coming from it with them having a safe place to go. And here's my works cited page. Oops, sorry. And that's the end. I had a great semester and I hope y'all did the same. Good luck.